We've got a couple of problem-solving tools to choose from, but the best tool isn't always the best for your situation. So let's discuss how to pick which tool to use. Hello, I'm Tom. Welcome to my channel where we talk about continuous improvement in an industrial setting. And today's video, it's based on a very relevant viewer question in, when do you actually use these tools? Should you use the problem-solving template that I advertised in several of my videos? Should you use it on all the problems that you find? If something repeats once, if something repeats 20 times, if it's a whole series of steps in a process and they all behave differently, do you then still use that 6-step problem-solving method where you define the problem and you have some temporary countermeasures, then you go into a fishbone and a 5 why? Well, the short answer is no. But you are of course interested in the bit longer answer on when do you then use it. And maybe for smaller problems, is there a different way, a quick way that takes less effort but can also get you the results? And the answer to that is a yes. So let's dive a bit into that. And for that, what we'll be talking about is that there is a complexity and a cost of problems. Now, they are not always completely linked. Know that the complexity of the problem has more effect on what type of tool you need to use. So basically how deep you need to get into understanding all the physics around the problem to solve it. Usually it's also linked to cost anyway, but this is more because simple, very expensive projects, they are usually done already. Now, on the other axis, we've got how difficult is it to really get to the nitty-gritty of this problem and solve the root causes. So higher is more effort needed to understand and then solve the process. Now, to start basically with the one that I advocate the most as a full package, because I think it is the most useful to you as a general, all-round problem-solving tool, and that is that 6-step approach. It fits roughly in the middle 2/3 of the complexity of problems. So that 6-step that has and the problem definition and a fishbone and a 5 why diving deeper into it and a structured way of implementing change. Now, some of the parts of that can also work quite well sort of separately. And especially when we look at not too complex problems, or when we basically know what is happening, we can instead use smaller parts of the same toolkit. And do you now see why I try to teach you the whole basic toolkit? You see, when the problem is relatively easy, so in practice that means you really know what happened. So you know for sure the direct cause of what made this problem in production. If you know that, you don't really need to define the problem as formally, because it's already clear. You don't need to do the fishbone to broaden the scope of options of what might have gone wrong. You can take the chance that, because usually if you observe it directly on the line, you are correct in this is the top level cause, diving into the 5 whys of why this specific direct, this top level cause happened. So the 5 why is a relatively simple tool to use, although you do want a trained and experienced facilitator with the group, because if you just let people do the 5 why, my experience is that it becomes sort of a formality and it does not support the real root cause thinking. But this is a tool that is relatively easy to use with a group facilitated, and if you just do 1 or 2 5 whys on a problem, that doesn't have to take as much time. Now, when you get slightly more complex problems, and then I'm especially thinking about we don't really know everything that happened around the problem, then we should go into really focusing on the problem definition. So some problems, and I've even shared a case study of how that happened to me with a pretty complex problem where we really expected to be, needing to do the whole 6-step and even a bit more advanced version of that. But when we did a thorough problem definition, we saw that we basically didn't need the rest. But anyway, if you have a problem that is not completely clear, then really the first thing to do, because afterwards you can still decide to make it into a full-fledged project, or you will see, hey, this gives us enough to basically put the countermeasures in place, is that problem definition. The 5W2H problem definition. Now, what you already see a bit is it builds up to the full program, and in fact, the Fishbone used purely by itself also gets a place in here, but this one, it will be with a bit of a remark. You can use the original full Ishikawa diagram to put not only the top level causes, but also the causes of that and the causes of that. So you make sort of a cause and effect type of diagram in the Fishbone, or looking at it in another way, you make a 3 to 5y of some of the branches of your problem causes. If you do it like that, and you do it in a correct way, it is actually a relatively complex tool to use, although it can help you. And you usually use them when you know pretty well what happened. You just don't really know which are all the causes that led up to this. So that's the place for the Fishbone. And then the 6-step problem-solving method. It is a set of basic tools. And that is by design. I really believe that if you use a set of relatively basic tools, which I think are the easiest to explain to inexperienced colleagues, a group of people, that gives you the best way to go with them, to take them along in the critical thinking journey, and it doesn't require you to have a fully trained group of problem solvers. For me, that gives the best results, and that also gives the best results to students who want to facilitate and who want to get results in their organization without first having to really train a whole bunch of colleagues. So this gives you a good way to have those multidisciplinary teams. Now, when you get into more advanced ways of problem solving with events maps and with full-fledged cause and effect diagrams, then in my experience, those tools do not give you the same rigid structure of your thinking. The tools will create a better, maybe, well, at least a more complete overview if you use them correctly. So they are very powerful tools to get into really the nitty-gritty. What is happening in my process? Which factors have an effect on that? How did we arrange it? How do we see it and control it and make it all work in our organization? And where did that go wrong? So they can be really powerful for if you do not get to the core of the problem with the more basic tools. But this is something for maybe a few percentages of the problems we encounter. And I don't think that I can fully train you on such tools by videos, by YouTube videos, or even an online course. It is just a bit too much for that. So this will give you way more results. But the other thing that you see here is that they are basically high up the problem-solving effort. And I didn't put this placement here at random. See, this full 6-step process, when you really go through all the steps, it allows you to solve pretty complex problems while still being relatively easy to use for the team. Now the Fishbone, the full-fledged Ishikawa Fishbone, it does not allow for the full range of what you can solve. In my experience, it is more complex to do a full Fishbone than it is to use the steps as I teach them to you. the same goes a bit for the 5Y. It is a tricky one. You need a facilitator, but it is a low complexity tool that is very suitable to be used at the shop floor if you have a couple of trained facilitators. The problem definition using really the 5 Ws, that in my experience is quite a bit more involved than just the 5Y. These two, they just have a different thingy, and that is the 5Y is when you really know what happened. The problem definition as a standalone is when you don't yet know all the things that happened. Both of them are valuable, but they have different use cases. So that's why you use them separately. And quite often, I would go to keep the 6 steps in your head. Form that multidisciplinary team. You also want several different viewpoints when you are doing this. Getting the problem definition there. Well, this is the problem definition. And here with the 5Y, we basically say we already know the problem definition. You just check it. Then getting some temporary measures in place. This is mainly needed if you think that the analysis will last more than just a few days, which with these it usually does. With these, usually not, hopefully not. Then you get into the basic Fishbone and back to the 5Y. So you broaden your scope and then you narrow down to the root cause. And then you implement countermeasures. Well, implementing countermeasures you have to do in all of them. And then you check if those countermeasures that you implemented are sustainable, if they are embedded in the systems of your organization. So you basically always go for problem solving through the 6 steps, just not always in the fully formalized way. When you become an experienced problem solving facilitator, you can sort of choose and pick which parts of this toolbox will you use with the team in a formal setting, and which parts of the toolbox, and especially the goals of why you would use that tool, will you use a bit in the background. Just check it when you talk with the team members and see what is happening around. Give it a small check. And of course you can always upscale when you see that more work is needed on the critical thinking and the root cause analysis. That is why we learned them all, but you were indeed correct when you were thinking not always that whole system, because it easily takes several days to several weeks, and that is just not needed. Most of the problems we have in production, we'll just quickly solve. We make sure that we do it with a future-proof solution, but that's about it. Then the problems that sort of reach the management layer as we had this multiple times, that is your cue as a problem-solving facilitator, because those really are the projects that you will shine at. And then when you go to the more complex things, maybe it's not even worth it for the organization right now, or if it is not really a problem, but it is lots of variation and variability in your processes, different tools. So that's how you choose which parts of the problem-solving toolbox to use. Yes, there are different tools than these, but I pick them for you because they give me the best results and make that we can take people along in the journey. Now, if you want to learn how to take people along in the problem-solving journey, whilst also becoming a much better problem solver yourself, go download the template or even check out the course I created specifically on this. For now, I wish you the best of luck solving your problems, and as always, enjoy the continuous improvement journey.